Imagine a currency that is used not only in the United States, but also in international trade, global banking, financial markets, and central bank reserves around the world. A currency that can influence economies thousands of miles away from America. That currency is the US dollar. But how did the dollar become so powerful? And why is it still the world's dominant currency today? Let's go back to the beginning. Before the United States had its modern financial system, Americans used different foreign and colonial currencies. After independence, the new country needed a standardized monetary system. In 1792, the United States passed the Coinage Act, officially establishing the dollar as the country's monetary unit. At first, American money was closely connected to precious metals such as gold and silver, but America's financial system would continue changing dramatically over the next century. Then came a major development. In 1913, the United States created the Federal Reserve System, commonly known as the Fed. The Federal Reserve became America's central banking system, responsible for monetary policy and playing a major role in maintaining financial stability. But the dollar was still far from becoming the dominant global currency. That changed during the 20th century. The two world wars transformed the global economy. During and after World War I, the United States became an increasingly important economic and financial power. Then came World War II. By the end of the war, much of Europe and Asia had suffered enormous economic destruction, while the United States had emerged as the world's leading industrial and financial power. And then came one of the most important economic meetings in modern history. In 1944, representatives from dozens of countries gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Their goal was to create a more stable international monetary system after the chaos of the Great Depression and World War II. The Bretton Woods system placed the US dollar at the center of the international monetary system. Other currencies were linked to the dollar, while the dollar itself was linked to gold at $35 per troy ounce. This gave the dollar enormous international importance. Central banks and governments around the world began holding dollars, and international trade increasingly relied on the American currency. But this system didn't last forever. By the 1960s and early 1970s, the United States faced growing economic pressures. There were concerns about America's gold reserves and the amount of dollars circulating internationally. Then, on August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon announced that the United States would suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold for foreign governments and central banks. This became known as the Nixon Shock. The connection between the dollar and gold was effectively broken.
The world gradually moved toward the modern fiat currency system, where the value of money is not directly tied to a fixed amount of gold. So why didn't the dollar collapse after leaving gold? Because the dollar had already become deeply embedded in the global economy. International banks used it. Governments held it. Companies traded with it. Financial markets relied on it. And another major factor strengthened its global role even further: oil. During the 1970s, the United States developed close economic and strategic relationships with major oil-producing countries, including Saudi Arabia. Oil markets became heavily associated with the dollar. This helped reinforce demand for dollars because countries importing oil often needed access to the American currency. This is part of the story behind the term petrodollar. But there's an important misconception here. It is not technically true that every country in the world is legally required to sell oil only in US dollars. The dollar's strength comes from its enormous role in global finance, trade, commodities, and international reserves, not from a single law forcing every oil transaction to use dollars. Today, the US dollar remains the world's leading reserve currency. Central banks around the world hold dollar-denominated assets as part of their foreign exchange reserves. The dollar is also heavily used in international trade, banking, investment, foreign exchange markets, and global financial transactions. Why? Because the United States has a massive economy, deep financial markets, a highly liquid government bond market, and decades of established global financial infrastructure. In other words, the dollar isn't powerful simply because America says it is. It is powerful because the rest of the world continues to use it. But the dollar isn't without competition. The euro is another major international currency. China's yuan has also become increasingly important in global trade. Digital currencies, geopolitical changes, and attempts by some countries to reduce their dependence on the dollar could reshape the international monetary system in the future. But replacing the world's dominant currency is not easy. It requires deep financial markets, stability, trust, liquidity, and widespread international acceptance. So, what makes the US dollar so powerful? Its story began with a young nation trying to create its own monetary system. It grew alongside America's economic and industrial rise. After World War II, it became the center of the global monetary system, and today it remains one of the most important financial instruments on Earth. The dollar isn't simply American money anymore. It has become a global language of finance. And as the world economy continues to change, one of the biggest questions of the future is, will the US dollar remain the world's dominant currency, or will a new monetary era eventually begin? Only time will tell. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more documentaries about money, economics, banking, cryptocurrency, history, technology, and the forces shaping our world.